How's it going? Welcome back, my wonderful wise ones, to a fantastic video today because we're going to be jumping into Borderlands 4. Now, it's been a long time, and honestly, everything is riding on this being a success. Borderlands knows this. They know they can't have another mistake like Borderlands 3. So today I'm going to be giving you my Borderlands 4 review based on the early access gameplay and all that good stuff. If you're curious, check out my last video where I discussed the conversations around Borderlands 4, what's happening with the game, marketing, and how it stacks up to the previous games from the older Borderlands, because we all know, and let's not pretend, that Borderlands 2 will forever be the GOAT, okay? It will just never be better than that, okay? Let's just get that out of the way, shall we?
Thank God. I was so worried you'd killed those bandits before they could murder old Gran. And you know what? Now I don't even have to pay him, so thanks for the help, man. Still gonna kill you, though.
I do hope you're having a fantastic day, my wise ones. And if you're not a wise one, what are you doing right now?
What?
Subscribe, become a wise one today, join this fantastic community. It would honestly be awesome to have you join us. If you love gaming analysis, early reviews, and philosophical content, I blend them all together on this channel to give you something unique, to create a community of intellectual gamers, which is a rare breed nowadays. So subscribe and like the video. Okay, thanks. So I'm going to get into my positives and negatives like I do with all of my early access reviews, because I think that just says a lot more than giving you a generic number score at the end of the video. I try and keep my game reviews as objective as possible, and I will always let you know when it's a personal opinion. I think that's also important. So I do hope you enjoy this one, and like I said, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and let's get on with the Borderlands 4 review.
Let's go already!
Now, as I said in my previous Borderlands video, it's very clear to me that Borderlands 4 is targeting new players, okay? This is not exactly, one for the OGs. Of course, it caters to them as well, because if you're a Borderlands fan, of course, the new Borderlands game is for you. But what I mean is they are dedicating this game to try and pull in a new audience, a new player base. Borderlands has always been a somewhat juvenile game series with its humor and its writing. Like I said, it did peak with Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel, Tales from the Borderlands, but this time around the writing style does seem to be heading back towards what made the second game and the first game so good.
Hey, buddy, it's me, Roland. Let's kill Handsome Jack and then we'll all go out for milkshakes. No, I'm just playing. He's still really dead.
I always find the first game so interesting because it was a very different game, and they wouldn't have even had the art style that made Borderlands so famous until the last minute changes, and the director of Borderlands didn't even want that art style, which I find quite interesting. There's good documentaries about the history, and I just love the whole franchise, how it has evolved over time. Check out my video where I go through the whole series. Borderlands 4 does have the potential to be truly one of the best games in Borderlands history, and I think it could actually be the definitive and the best Borderlands game, quite honestly, just because of the gameplay. And I haven't seen, everything that the narrative has to offer, but from what I have seen, it is certainly more grounded, more serious, especially with the boss battles and the enemies that you're fighting. Also, you don't have to have constant dialogue from annoying characters. There is a toggle for some of that. And just the bad guy in this is way more interesting compared to the third game, where it was a bunch of goddamn TikTok influencers or some shit. Mr. Beast, Jimmy Beast, that's right, he was literally the bad guy.
Mr. Beast, what does he teach? Blasphemy and greed.
So this time around you're not on Pandora anymore, so like I said, it does cater to new players that, want a fresh kind of start as well. And you're basically entering this planet that's been cut off from the rest of the universe, the rest of the galaxy, and it's run by a crazy cyborg overlord that basically has control over some of the people on the planet, and there's going to be different factions fighting each other. Not exactly the most original thing in the world, but honestly, it is an interesting, time exploring this new world, for new creatures, for new manufacturers, for new weapons, and for new companies that design these weapons and all that kind of stuff. I do feel like the lore itself is interesting, and it is a giant open world, and I have to preface that off the bat because I don't think people really understand just how big this game is. There's no loading screens, it's all seamless. There's 4 different locations or biomes to explore, you could say, but it's not hub based open world. It is literally giant open world, and that does scare me because some of the side content that I have seen does seem to be a lot of that Ubisoft filler bloat, and some of it is truly great exploration, and that's why I said this could be the best Borderlands game, because the exploration here, when it is done right, does feel super good, and that's to me what makes a good open world game, because if you fail with exploration, it becomes a goddamn, slog, and it feels like you're at work. A game shouldn't feel like work. It shouldn't feel like you're ticking off a to-do list, and like very monotonous. But luckily, some of the exploration here is very good, but it's not all perfect. Now, Borderlands has changed a lot over the years, and honestly, it's nice to see it in a place where it takes the narrative a little bit more seriously, because the world building and the lore of Borderlands to me is actually quite interesting. It doesn't have to be 100% serious all the time, and that's kind of the fun nature of Borderlands. It needs to have that humor in there, but it shouldn't just be, stupid toilet humor and kind of cringeworthy, over-the-top characters. Endless claptraps would be absolute hell. I think that's what hell actually looks like. So the first positive that I want to talk about is the bosses, okay? The bosses this time around are absolutely incredible, okay? This is exactly what I think is going to keep me hooked to Borderlands, okay? Not so much the, narrative this time around. Of course, it is still somewhat interesting, but to me, it's not why I play Borderlands. Not since 2 anyway, or Tales, because there's not many games or even looter shooters, to be honest, apart from Destiny and stuff like that, that have, the opportunity to explore a massive open world, and fight, these crazy bosses. And honestly, this does borrow some elements from Destiny, but it is much more of a big open world to explore instead of like, missions to go on. And the bosses themselves in Borderlands 4 are just absolutely incredible. This is truly the best thing that they've added, in my opinion. Some might say that it is a little bit gimmicky, because each boss so far, from what I've seen, each boss that I've seen so far does actually have a gimmick to them. And I'm sure there are going to be some bosses that are just, the classical enemy with a bigger health pool. But honestly, I really like the fact that now when you're fighting bosses, you actually have to, think tactically about what you're doing. Some of it is kind of easy because they have certain weak points, or, of course, like all enemies in Borderlands, some are more, weakened with elemental damage, certain, weapon types and stuff like that. But it's more than that, okay? It's the level design itself, the level design of the boss. The bosses and level design this time around actually go hand in hand together, and that's what to me is special about this, because it's not just, a little bit of platforming mixed in with the boss battle, or, avoiding giant AoE attacks, or having kind of bullet-esque hell gameplay with some of the bosses. It's more about how they actually change up, your playstyle mid-fight. And, it's not just like entering stage 2 of the boss battle, but it's how the level itself, the level arena changes with the boss tactics. To me, that's super cool, and not many games handle bosses that well, and it's great to see that in Borderlands. Honestly, it's super refreshing. So the actual open world now, that's a bit of a positive slash negative. Like I said, it does depend on what kind of player you are. If you are a fan of massive open world games with tons and tons of activities in them, like you could literally play Borderlands 4 forever at a point. You could literally play Borderlands 4 forever, and to me, I don't really like those endless game experiences. I find them a little bit, kind of tiresome after a while, and also it means that the content that is there isn't necessarily as well put together because, you know, it kind of feels endless and it's not all handcrafted. Because, you know, some of the quests and stuff like that, some of the random content that you engage with in the open world isn't the most exciting, and it's kind of the same stuff that you see in other big multiplayer games like Destiny, you know, raiding dungeons and stuff like that. It's fun, but after a while, you know, you realize that it's basically rinse and repeat. You know, we're all kind of tired, I think, most of us anyway, of that kind of Ubisoft style of gameplay where, you know, it's a random event and it's exciting the first time around, but then you just see it happen over and over again. It doesn't matter if you're in a new region or not, it's the same event happening over and over again. To me, that's kind of boring, and there is, you know, elements like that in the open world, but again, you don't actually have to engage with it if you don't want to. It's kind of extra content. So I'm talking about things like the airships and stuff like that. You know, it's super cool that they've added that you can literally, you know, get transported into like a flying vehicle and then take out a bunch of enemies or go clear a dungeon and stuff like that. But there are times where it feels like kind of recycled content. The vaults themselves is super interesting this time around because basically to access these vaults you need to, you know, gather a bunch of doodads, but it's not like tied to a main story or a main quest as much as it used to be. Now it's actual kind of side content to actually explore these higher tier dungeons and get really good loot at the end of it. To me, that is super satisfying, and I do like some of the open world events that they've added. Exploration is very important in Borderlands 4. And I feel like they did a much better job compared to the previous games of just naturally exploring, you know, having the map filled out by exploration itself, you know, just not even following a destination, just going off and exploring, finding something cool. There are times in Borderlands 4 where you find, you know, just interesting pockets with good environmental storytelling, some kind of lore that you can find there, good loot to find, and it's not necessarily an event or, you know, a gameplay mission or side mission or just one of these random events. It's just literally, you know, they filled out this world with little Easter eggs and treasures, and this all feeds into the traversal and the new movement system in Borderlands 4, and that is a huge positive. So let's talk about that. I will quickly just ask that if you could consider dropping a thanks or sending some support to my channel, that would mean a great deal to me, as I am trying super hard to go full-time right now, and I do hope you enjoy this early access review. Do bear in mind that this early access Borderlands 4 review is only talking about the content that, you know, content creators have got their hands on, from the preview gameplay and all that kind of stuff. Some of the late gameplay as well, but not literally the full experience, and I just want to make that clear because it is important to talk about these games before, you know, the marketing gets the better of you, in my opinion. Also, I am going to be attending the Tokyo Game Show in a few weeks, which is happening at the end of September for press, and I will be covering a lot of new games there. So if there's anything in particular that you would like to know for next year, or new games that are coming out very soon, please let me know down below in the comments. I do appreciate it because I'm very new to all of this kind of press access, but it is very exciting that I can interview developers and stuff like that. So let me know what kind of coverage you'll want to see, and yeah, just keep an eye out on the channel.
Let's go already!
But overall, just the movement, everything, it just feels so much better this time around. Bosses are so much better, and to me that's going to make fighting them over and over again to get that rare loot even more better. And honestly, it just feels great to explore because now, not only with the better movement, but they've also added swimming, so there's some areas that you can actually, you know, explore by water as well. There's also a lot of verticality to some of the locations in Borderlands 4, and they've added an actual parkour system, a, you know, climbing mechanic, so you can literally scale these buildings and climb up them and then find hidden areas. You know, this is a good way to discover, you know, kind of like Breath of the Wild, where you want to go next. Obviously, it's a little bit more checklisty designed than Breath of the Wild, but it does still have that nice flow to it where you feel like you are naturally exploring. So movement this time around in Borderlands 4 has changed a lot. So now there's double jumping, there's, dashing around. It just feels much more floaty, and, you're kind of gliding around as well. You can literally fly in this game. You can summon your little Destiny bike, which is quite funny, but it is literally basically the bike from Destiny. But just movement in general feels so much better this time around, and it allows for, quicker movement across this giant open world, which is needed. But I do kind of miss the, hitch a ride kind of system. I do kind of miss the catch a ride kind of system. Just summoning a vehicle out of nowhere does kind of take away some of that immersion, I guess, but it does make the gameplay flow a lot better. You even have a goddamn grappling hook this time around, and it's not just useful for, taking down enemies and, chucking these giant barrels at them, similar to Halo Infinite, but it's also just good for traversal. So you can use it for platforming, you can use it mid-combat as well. So all of this together just makes it feel so smooth and quicker than ever. Like, the speed of, the gameplay with Borderlands 4 feels a lot faster compared to the previous games. Now, I'm not going to get into all of the nitty-gritty details of the characters because there's so many videos already going into that. So basically you have the mage, the siren, okay? You have the berserker, and then you have the gravator and the exosuit character. And basically all of these have cool, unique abilities, and what's special about them this time around is it's not just one ability or a few abilities and then that's it. So if you want to, focus more on summoning and supporting the other members, then I would say go for Siren. If you want to focus on kind of melee or just like a constant momentum of having your turrets do the work for you and give you that extra support, then the Exo class is super cool. Also, it has a super cool, it also has a really nice touch with that class because it almost at times turns into a third-person hack and slash because you can focus more on the melee side of things as well. I think the dual-wielding kind of berserker is going to be the class for me because it's super cool how you can just kind of have these dual axes, throw them around, and then summon a shield. It just makes you feel like a badass. The gravator is also an interesting playstyle because it's not so much about being super aggressive, more defensive, I would say, and kind of, taking damage to as many enemies as possible. So basically there are things like rep kits which boost your character even more. Think of them as, kind of health pickups in the previous Borderlands games, but this time around it's not just health or like a shield buff or anything like that. You can literally have, like extra stamina or extra, bonus to certain elemental weapon types and stuff like that. And what I really like is if you're kind of doubling down on a particular playstyle or certain weapon type, or you have a particular weapon brand that you love the most, then basically instead of artifact slots that you would get in the previous game, now you have like mod slots for your favorite weapons. So it just incentivizes you to play with the same weapon type or the same brand at least, if you're kind of decking out that way, which is another way to get a tons of damage. It does kind of limit your choice, but like I said, you can always change these mods around. So it's just so cool. There's a lot of different customization options now for your character. So there's, it almost has like the light RPG mechanics, and it is still, a looter shooter first, but it does have a lot of player agency when it comes to gameplay itself. Now this goes even further with the, kind of mixing and matching of gun parts, okay? And this is more late game stuff, and I haven't seen too much of it myself, but I have seen some of it. And basically, later on you get certain drops of, weapon parts, and then you can use these weapon parts to actually combine, into unique weapons. So you can have, you can still have that base gun from Jacob or something, but then add more mods to it from other companies and then make it a unique hybrid. And to me that's even more crazy because there's so many guns this time around. A lot of it does feel like AI generated goop at times, but a lot of it is crazy because when you do find that perfect gun, that perfect legendary, that is super cool, and then you can even combine it, customize it even more with these weapon parts, and then there's just so much more customization here. It's kind of overwhelming, if I'm honest. There are also new, weapons from different companies this time around because you are based in a new location, a new planet, so it's not just the same old weapons that you've had before, which is nice and quite refreshing. There's 3 brand new different companies to play around with. and at times it does get a little bit overwhelming, like I said. Also, the balance is still not perfect, I would say, but they can always tweak that. It's early on, it's before the official stuff even comes out, so I'm sure they're going to balance it even more. But you can be picking up high level rare weapons kind of early on compared to Borderlands 1 and 2, but it is still a lot better than the previous game. Now, some bonuses I want to quickly add, more positives, because let's be honest, I've done a lot of research and a lot of note-taking from my time looking at Borderlands 4, and honestly, it's all mostly positives. I do think that this is honestly the best Borderlands gameplay-wise, not necessarily narrative-wise, but time will tell with that. But honestly, it is the most exciting and most fleshed out Borderlands experience. I do kind of miss those simpler days, and I do wish that they did change some of their design choices, because I'm not a big fan of big open world games with filler content in them, and this certainly is that to a degree, but there is still meaningful exploration here. And like I said, if you focus down on the content you enjoy, you don't have to engage with it. It isn't grindy too much. There is of course some grind to it, but there is plenty of bosses, interesting side stories to make that grind actually fun instead of feeling like a chore. But one thing that I will say is that they have added split screen to Borderlands 4, and in a game coming out in 2025, having split screen is just so unheard of, and honestly it's very refreshing, and more games need to do this. So to end on a few negatives, okay, just to round off my Borderlands 4 review and the Borderlands 4 early gameplay review, I will just say that it is using Unreal Engine 5, and if you're like me, you're not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of Unreal Engine 5, but honestly, how the developers used it this time around, at least it's actually, fluid and playable, and it doesn't have much performance problems. I will say that the art style isn't as interesting as previous Borderlands games. It's more kind of glossed over, and at times it looks kind of artificial, I will say, but it does look graphically nice. But that's the problem with modern day gaming now. It's all about graphical fidelity, not so much the art style. And of course it does still have the Borderlands art style. I just wouldn't say it pops as much as the older games. Also, I will say that the writing this time around, although it is better, Borderlands has always had the constant character back and forth, but that is another small negative which some players might not like, is at times it does feel like a non-stop, where there are characters always in your ear saying some bullshit that you don't really care about. And the final negative is just scaling. As of right now, I don't think that scaling is done super well in Borderlands 4. I don't like, in a massive open world game where you go out and you want to explore more of the world, but artificially it blocks you off because enemies in that area are way more difficult and higher level than you, and then when you come back, then it kind of scales. I just think they could have done it in a better way, where you can explore the whole world straight off the bat. To me, that's truly what an open world game should be, but honestly, I do see why they did it. I just am not a big fan of how they did the level scaling with Borderlands 4, and maybe they will adjust it. I do like that you can actually play multiplayer with different difficulty options and stuff like that. That to me is super cool. I'm not sure that Borderlands 4 is exactly the type of game I'll want to play single player, but I do think it will be a fun time with a group of, close friends or family or whatever. So I am excited for Borderlands 4, but at times it does feel like I've kind of outgrown the series compared to when I, played it back as a teenager, just narrative-wise. But there is still some good stuff here, and like I said, Easter eggs are back, like finding the Teenage Mutant Turtle Easter eggs in Borderlands before. Stuff like that is back, and the bosses, to me, the bosses is the biggest thing, the biggest improvement, and the movement. Those two main things are the main reason why Borderlands 4 is special and the best, in my opinion, gameplay-wise. Simple traversal with so much more freedom, and boss gameplay. Those two things, to me, is why I'm interested in Borderlands 4. So I do hope you enjoyed the video, my wise ones. If you're new, like I said, subscribe to the channel. So that is my review of Borderlands 4 from the early access gameplay and all the stuff that I have seen so far. I do hope you enjoyed this video, my wise ones, and if you're new here, like I said, subscribe, become a wise one, give the video a like. It truly does mean absolutely everything to me. You know, it's a lot of effort making videos. I'm not going to pretend it's easy, but I'm not going to say, like, you know, it's as difficult as a job, but I am trying super hard to go full-time on this channel, and the whole reason I do this is, you know, the community aspect. So if you want to be a part of the community, subscribe, sound off in the comments, because that's the only reason this is fun. So let me know what you think down below on Borderlands 4 and modern day gaming in general, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Take care of yourselves. Peace out.